So thank you all for joining us for the How to Use Your Committee and Advisor for Feedback workshop. Joining us today, Dr. Helen Wing, Professor, Life Sciences, Dr. Lavette Atisi, Executive Director of Undergraduate Research, Office of Undergraduate Research, and Dr. Sarah Jordan, Professor, Program Director, and Graduate Coordinator for Couples and Family Therapy. They will be answering your questions about how to use your committee and advisor for feedback. So I'm going to hand it over to them to do brief introductions, and then we will begin taking questions. Lavette, if you don't mind starting.
Of course. Hi, thanks for the lovely invites. Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to see friends here. My name is Helen Wing. I'm a professor of anthropology and also currently executive director of the Office of Undergraduate Research. And I've worked with graduate students in mentor capacity for a long time. And I had been a graduate student myself in different settings, international, and here several times. Yes, I'll try to actually share some insights with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Sure. I am Sarah Jordan. I am as mentioned, I was in the program director, grad coordinator of couple and family therapy. I'm also the grad faculty fellow for the grad college, and I've been at UNLV 3.5 years, and I was at Texas Tech for 12 years, about 15 years, almost 16, working with grad students as a faculty member, and then of course being one myself. So again, I'll share my experiences on both sides. So thanks for having me.
And Helen.
Hi, everyone. My name's Helen Wing. I'm a professor over here in the School of Life Sciences. I'm also the graduate coordinator of the School of Life Sciences. Our program's about 60 grad students strong. So I've got a lot of experience from that sort of vantage. I was actually a graduate student over in the UK, but I think for today's topics, I'm still going to have a good experience from which to draw to help you. So hopefully you find that useful.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I think we'll jump right into questions. So the first question is, what is the role of committee members, advisors, and the student when it comes to feedback?
So I guess I can take that one if you'd like. So I think a graduate education is something that obviously you embark upon, but you want to do it with people. You want to surround yourself with people that are going to guide you along that track the best that they can. And so for the advisors, you want people that are going to be engaged and committed to seeing you through. And so having someone that you know, meeting with people and sort of making sure that you've got a nice rapport with those people to start with from the very get-go is very important. You don't want to be intimidated by your committee members too much so that you can't open up and share things about them, but you also got to have a healthy respect for who they are and where they're at in their profession, because obviously you want to aspire perhaps to follow similar paths, and so I think that that's really important. The last part of that, what's the role of the student when it comes to feedback? I always say, you know, you're embarking upon this journey, and the best thing that you can do is sort of leave yourself open to all feedback that you get, knowing that it's not always going to be easy. You know, I always tell my students when I accept them into the lab that there will be times when you really don't like me very much. But you know what? It's a journey of personal growth, and that's what graduate school is. And so personal growth is hard, really hard to undergo. And I think that if you view it from that vantage, then that can really sort of help you get in the right mindset for being receptive to feedback that you receive.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in next. So I'd like to start by just emphasizing that graduate student must consider it their own responsibility to seek out interactions with faculty, to be able to identify mentors or advisors, to be able to form a committee from an informed vantage point. I think it's unrealistic to expect that faculty members will just run around trying to find right mentees or committees to serve on. So in that sense, it's a responsibility that falls on you as a graduate student. So in that sense, you have to do your homework, because in every college, in every school, in every department, by your field, right, expectations may be different, and departments even culturally may be different, right? So what's the role of the committee, right? What's the role of the primary advisor versus secondary advisors versus tertiary advisors? Whether committees are largely and single-handedly run by the primary advisor, and others like rubber stamp things, or they're very hands-off, or they're very equally invested. See, this is your job to first figure out, right? Understand your cultural context, political context, understand your resources, understand the material, and develop a strategy accordingly. And again, it requires actually a lot of work to identify who is the most compatible, who is the best fitting mentor or advisor, right? So in that sense, I would advise that before committing to this relationship, because remember, this is a two-way street with the mentor and the mentee, right? So you have to actually take your time to make a good decision, because this is going to be a relationship, right? That will be a kind of like, a long relationship, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, sometimes longer or shorter. So in that sense, I would advise graduate students who are looking for mentors to just make sure that they first understand their department culture, understand the nature of committees in that department, then go take classes, right? Or audit courses of some of the faculty they think they might be interested in working with. Go to their talks, go to social events to see how they're interacting with graduate students. Also probe, right? Ask other graduate students, ask other faculty, ask departmental staff to see and to gauge the reputation. Remember that faculty is accepting you as a student, but you're also accepting. So it's a two-way street. So this is the most important point that I would like to make today. It's your job. It's a lot of job actually to start it right. It's like marriage, right? You cannot just hastily get into this relationship. You have to take your time.
I wanted to jump in on that too. And I see that we have 3, 4, 5, 6 people, so not a lot of people in this particular, but I know that we are recording. And I was just curious if those that are listening have access to the chat. I was curious in terms of this particular audience, if most of you are master's students, doc students. I was just curious about that. If you're able to put that in the chat, that's because I think sometimes that experience could be tailored a little bit. Okay, thank you. I echo everything that's been said. I think colleges, programs are very different. So depending on your discipline, you want to check your climate again to see what the culture is there. And that's your job to ask about that. Don't assume what you think the role of someone is. In some areas you may be assigned, some areas maybe you're assigned, but you can choose to move advisors. Thanks for putting all those in the chat. So a lot of master's students, okay. So some of you may not have a thesis committee, some of you may not have a thesis, but you have an advisor, or you do other projects working with them. And so that relationship might be a little bit different than a thesis chair that you're working on research with. But I agree that the relationship is important. I think an advisor is someone that you should feel like you can reach out and call and ask questions to and advice. I just had I'm a therapist, so I get a lot of interesting phone calls throughout the day, and I supervise therapists. And one of my people called me in crisis today and that I'm supervising, and she says, I'm so glad that you're the person that I have to call, and I'm so glad I picked you, right? So we were kind of joking because this person has a lot of crises, not because of her, but because of what she does. And so we're just kind of joking a little bit about that. But it's a good point. Like, she could have chose a lot of different people, and we have a good relationship, and it should be somebody that you feel comfortable with. Sometimes you may be in a, okay, so you're a doc student and sometimes your advisors are assigned to you. Okay, so what if you don't get a choice? What if it's somebody maybe that you don't work well with or you don't know very well? Then I think it's important, again, to understand what your role is, what the expectations are, what your advisor's role is, what their expectations are. And if you ever felt like there was any maltreatment, not that that happens here, but I know it happens in general, that you should be empowered to, always speak up if you feel like there's, I think sometimes students feel like there's situations where they can't speak up or they don't know who to go to if they feel like things are not, the expectations are not reasonable. And that's something that we don't talk about much, but I think that's important to talk about, that's something that always should be considered. So understanding expectations, understanding roles are very important. So mostly masters, but a doc student, and again, sometimes you are not, you don't get to pick your advisors. So
Sarah, I think you touched on this a little bit, but the next question is, in your own experience, what is the best way for graduate students to handle a mentor, advisor, committee member who are not fulfilling their roles or responsibilities when it comes to providing feedback?
So if it is a committee member, kind of the chain of command is, if there's a committee member and you have an advisor or a chair, you would go to them first, right? You would go to the person that you're directly working with and say, I'm having some issues or concerns about, and ask for their advice, right? That's what they're there for. If, for instance, the person that you're supposed to go to is the person that you are having trouble with, then that's when you would seek perhaps your department chair, your grad coordinator, again, depending on the person who is in that role, you would go to kind of the next, you always want to sort of go up the chain of command, who you would talk to and say, I need some advice. I'm not sure what to do. I'm needing some help here. So that's sort of what how you handle that case.
Livette, Sarah, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes. Again, I'll reiterate the same point. Choose wisely to prevent undesirable circumstances like that. But like Akami, if you're in a scenario where your advisor is assigned and you're not compatible, right? Because remember, there are so many different variables, right? Female, gender roles, power differentials, rights, political views, socioeconomic status. Like if you're an international student or if you're a graduate student with disability, if you're a graduate student from an underserved minority group. So there are so many different factors that may impact and that will form these relationship, right? Mentor-mentee relationship. And understand that not all advisors are mentors, not all mentors are advisors, right? So there's going to be that. And also there's this concept of mentoring down, mentoring up, and mentoring across, because most of the time people just assume that mentoring is a one-way street where the more senior person, guides the junior person. But in certain cases, the junior person, the mentee, must actually guide the more senior person or the mentor. And how can this be done effectively? Communication. I like the phrasing, being clear is being kind. So again, setting expectations clearly, right? And communicating expectations clearly. And again, you're expecting feedback from your mentors, but it's also your job to give your mentor feedback. See, in that sense, be aware of pitfalls. When you see red flags, when you identify them, don't wait, right? Get ready, be ready to address this, because there's such a thing as mentorship malpractice, right? If they're not doing their job, it is okay for you to bring this up, right? Again, set, for example, firm deadlines. Professor such and such, I've sent you 3 chapters, right? Like 3 months ago, and I'm still waiting, and this will really impact my progress toward degree completion, et cetera, et cetera. Clearly communicate that, you're actually experiencing this hardship, right? And it's beyond your control and stemming from your mentor's behavior. So just call it out, right? Be clear, and also set firm deadlines. So say that, I would like to actually receive your feedback by this time, right? Set deadlines so that I can stay on track, so that I can actually make progress toward degree completion. Otherwise, I'm going to be in a difficult situation, right? So I think being clear, being straightforward, being open, and being communicative, that's your job. And if you're doing it, and if it's still not working, then that's a different story, because then you need to maybe adopt a firmer stance and bring the entire committee in. Also go to your graduate coordinator, right? And follow the chain of command. Don't just directly go to graduate college. Don't directly go to the dean or department chair, but start with your committee chair and then work your way up to the graduate coordinator. Escalate it, but again, keep it professional, and focus on you and your progress, not like, he's not doing that, he's not doing this, right? So I'm having a hard time, I'm not meeting deadlines because of this. So in that sense, it is very important to just be careful and be sensitive about these things, but also be open.
Helen, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think the deadline thing was very important there. I think that you have to realize that faculty are pulled very many different directions on a daily basis. And, oftentimes their email inbox is like, 50, hundreds deep, right? And so things can get overlooked, and it's not, please don't take these things personally. It's much more important to just be persistent and to maintain your professional demeanor, and then it will get dealt with. More often than that, that is simply what is going on here. I think that just trying to put yourself in their shoes, and I know that's always challenging to do if you don't have a very good understanding of all the roles that a professor has, but believe me when I tell you, many of us are pulled in lots of different directions. We have our teaching, our research, we have service obligations as well, and we're mentoring often 10 or more graduate students as well. Okay, and so just be persistent, and come back if you don't get the immediate response that you desire. Then keep going, and I'm 9 times out of 10 it will work. Just that simple persistence.
I wanted to add one thing. I know I spoke at the beginning. I think there's a difference between being incompatible and there being inappropriate or malpractice going on. There's 2 different things. You cannot like or agree with or be compatible, like with your advisor. That's one thing. But are they doing the job they're supposed to do? That's something different. If they don't respond to you, if they treat you inappropriately, that's totally different, right? So just understanding those distinctions, I think, are important.
In that regard, getting back to this personal growth thing, oftentimes the lessons that you learn in graduate school can be kind of tough to learn, right? And your advisor is going to give you direction to maybe improve your writing. Maybe it's the 5th or 6th iteration and you just want to be done with it, right? But your advisor is trying to get you to a place where you're meeting standards perhaps that are acceptable in the field. And those lessons are really hard to sort of take on and to listen to and embrace. And that's why sometimes it can be very frustrating to be a graduate student. From the advisor's perspective, it can also be very frustrating. So these are they can be tense relationships where there's a lot of, oh, they said this and I don't want to do it. And why don't they do what I say they have to do? So these are, quite complex relationships that you're having. So that's where we circle back to make sure that you've got someone with a good rapport, because if you've got that solid foundation, that sort of relationship that can take a few, knocks, hit backwards and forwards, you're going to ultimately end up with a much more productive and successful mentee-mentor relationship.
I just actually, if I may, to make like a final notice to clarify what I just said about like giving faculty a deadline, because I don't want to come off just right, because Dr. Wing was absolutely right. Like faculty are always overtaxed, right? With their tentacles moving into like 200 different directions. So what I meant is this more specifically. So, I mean, you have to be also very cognizant of their time, right? Respectful of their time. And if your professor or if your mentor is not responding, right, timely, but that, they're actually just about to submit a big grant, right? Just wait. Or they're finalizing a manuscript, right, to Nature or Science, right? And you're like, I sent you an email last week and still waiting. Wait, right? Or during the, say, admission period, during the grading period. So you have to be very savvy, politically savvy, right, socially savvy, and see those rights. Just kind of like science. Just wait and work with your mentor. Okay, that's what I meant. Not like just give them ultimatum. I'm giving you a deadline, hard deadline by this time, right? That's not what I meant, right? Because if they're working on a grant, that's what they have to do. If they are submitting a manuscript, that's their priority, not you. So you have to work as a team. I hope this is clear.
Thank you all. How do you suggest approaching the discussion of removing someone from your committee that no longer feels appropriate or is a fit?
So I think Sarah touched on this earlier, and I wholly agree with her, that you have to use the chain of command. The first place to go would be your advisor, and then perhaps either, if it's the advisor that you're talking about, then often you can't be orphaned in the graduate program without a primary advisor. So then it becomes a very important goal of yours to find that new advisor. Otherwise, you can end up on probation because you're orphaned, what we consider orphaned in the program. At least in the School of Life Sciences, that's how it works. And so, but certainly in terms of how you go about it, talk to your advisor, explain what's going on, and why you feel like maybe it's not a good fit any longer. Maybe your science has moved away from what you were doing, or your research, sorry, I'm a scientist, what can you say? Your research has moved in a different direction, and they really don't have the expertise that you want. Maybe they're not as responsive as you had initially thought they would be. There are, maybe they leave the university. That's also, faculty take jobs outside of the university, and that can mean that perhaps you become less of a priority, or the priorities have changed somewhat. You'd like to think that if you make that commitment, a faculty makes a commitment to you, they would honor that. But that's not always the case. It varies from person to person. And so just be aware of that. And also I want to sort of make sure that you understand that this is okay and it doesn't reflect badly on you at all. Having said that, if you have made 5 changes in the course of a PhD, or if you're a master's student, 2 or 3 changes in the course of a master's student, that's when it would start to look a little bit strange. Okay, so 1 change is no big deal. We don't expect you to change every other month, though.
So, want to go for a second?
Oh, do you want to go next, or do you want me to?
I said
Okay.
You wanted to go next.
Okay.
Shuffle things.
Being a therapist and a communication researcher, most of the time, there are committee issues because of interpersonal conflict or issues, right? Either just disagreements or personality conflicts, or there was an issue, a misunderstanding, expectations are different between advisor and advisee. And so I agree that the chain of command is the best way to do that. But it's usually an interpersonal thing. Sometimes it can be somebody leaving the university. Sometimes it can be because your research is going in a new direction. And also the climate of the program can, in our program, we're very easy, like, oh, you want to switch advisors, no big deal. But we have a process like, okay, well, if you want to switch advisors, go to your current advisor, let them know, and then ask the person you want to be the advisor, make sure that's okay, make sure we're communicating about this versus just saying, oh, I don't want you, I'm going to go talk to so-and-so. And they said yes, and I don't know that they don't want me anymore. You know what I mean? Like making sure that the communication chain is there. But that doesn't happen in every department. I know that sometimes faculty, we don't like to talk about this either, but sometimes faculty feel like, oh, well, why did my student go to you? Like I got my feelings hurt because my student left me and they're going to work with you now. And it does happen, and I've seen it happen. And so just be aware that sometimes as a student, sometimes faculty members, if they have students that aren't wanting to work with them, sometimes that kind of hurts their feelings. And to just be aware of that and to go about it in a very respectful way and to follow the policy of the department the best they can.
Yeah, I'll echo similar sentiments. But if you consider graduate education as a journey, as a long process, sometimes actually changing advisors might be very positive and it may be received really well, right? Especially if you're in a department with a lot of interaction between different faculty members, and if there are actively involved committee members, right, working with you, and if you're actually scholarship evolves and you feel like this, instead of Dr. X, Dr. Y's supervision might be more beneficial to me because I would like to specialize in these fields, right? And then Dr. Y can actually guide me better. Why? Because he or she is a specialist in this field. See, these are all great, right? Celebrate, nice, no drama. But in other cases, there might be stigma associated with it. And I've seen actually several times that students just wanted to jump ship because one of the committee members was demanding, right? Or not babysitting, or not telling the student like how great the student was. Like, because sometimes some faculty members, they will pamper you. They will say, you're a superstar. You're the best thing after bread and butter, right? Wow, right? You're the superstar. And then, being young and inexperienced and just excited and enthusiastic, some students may take it in different ways. Then they can't deal well with criticism, right? Even if it's constructive. And I've seen this so many times too. That's why when I work with graduate students and when they sought my feedback, I usually always jokingly ask them the same question. I said, like, do you want me to tell you how great you are, or do you want me to tell you what I really think about your work? Not about your personality, not about you as a person, but about your paper, like your manuscript, right, draft. And students always say, oh, of course, I need to hear like what you think. Then you tell the student, right, what you think, and then drama, sometimes tears, sometimes they can't take it, because that's why, it's really important to understand. So if you're in the process of dumping your one of your committee members because he or she is not your best friend, BFF, he or she is not socializing with you, he or you don't like him personally, those are terrible reasons, right? And not very professional. And actually, you have to be careful. So in that sense, even if you feel that way, you have to reflect really carefully on pros and cons of changing your advisor. You have to seek advice from other committee members. You have to try to resolve any differences before you finalize your decision, right? And you also have to be professional the entire time, right? You just don't want to go around just trashing this faculty member or bad mouthing, telling everybody how mean or difficult he or she is, right? Again, this is really important. You have to be professional, and your decision must be just entirely on that professional relationship. Like, how will that impact your career development, professional development, and finally degree completion?
I just thought of something else. Sorry if I jump in. When I meet with, I used to work with doc students. I work with master students now, but so when I was working on dissertation committees, and students would come to me, and I was their chair, and they said, "Okay, I need to form a committee." I said, "I want you to think about not only your research interest, not only who you get along with, but think about how the committee members get along with each other." Okay, so I've seen situations where they say, "Oh, I want to work with so and so in this other department." And I know that so and so in that other department doesn't like so and so that's already on their committee. I can't necessarily say that to the student, right? But I could say, okay, well, let's think about how that would work. How would these people work together, right? Do we know of situations where they work so I try to help them the best that I can to try to troubleshoot who are going to be the best people to work together. Because I've seen situations where committee members, faculty, may have issues with one another, because we're human too, right? They may have issues with one another and the student gets caught in the middle. And so I try, as they're forming their committee, and I try to be helpful in a way that's not, I never say anything negative about another member, but I say, you know what, I'm not sure that this and this person or this committee as a whole, I don't know how they would function. Have you thought about perhaps this person with this person? Or have you thought about going this route? So I never tell them no, but I offer them suggestions if I have information about potential issues. And the times when I've offered the information, they say, no, I want so-and-so across campus. Unfortunately, it has come back to not be beneficial for the student. And I've seen cases where the students have dropped out, where it has really not been good for the student. And so again, I'm in a very careful position. I can't say, hey, I told you so, or these people don't work well together, but I'm trying to look out for the student as the chair to make sure that, they still have the option, but I want to try to give them other possibilities so that we don't end up in a situation where the student's caught in the middle. So again, I'm just saying that as a faculty member, because sometimes those situations happen. Who plays well together in the sandbox is what I always say. Like, who's your team that's gonna work well together?
True.
Touching on the pros and cons that Levent said, are there pros and cons to having co-chairs?
So in my experience, I've been a co-chair a few times. There can be pros and there can be cons. The times when it's pro is if, let's say, you have a faculty member who might be retiring, might be going on maternity leave, might be leaving the university. Those situations, it's good to have a co-chair. That way you can have some consistency while there's a break for the one faculty member. Times when it's challenging to have co-chairs is when the chairs don't know whose role is which, okay? So I was a co-chair once. It worked out really well, but we clearly defined our roles. My role was this. The other chair role was this. Everything from who's going to hood at graduation to who's going to do what with a manuscript. And we outlined it very clearly. And there was a reason. There was a very clear reason. Why do you want two chairs? It can be very complicated. So there has to be a really good reason, I think, to have two chairs. It can be helpful, but it can also be very messy in terms of who's doing what.
I completely agree. I always subscribe to the notion that you don't want co-chairs unless you absolutely have to. And there are certain, and again, I've actually co-chaired, so I've been in that situation, and it worked well. But it's a rather delicate situation. And to me, the bottom line is, if you are to get into that kind of a scenario, you have to make sure that that your co-chairs are not duplicating one another, but they're complementing, right? They actually will serve you from different angles, and they will actually help you with different aspects of your career development, professional development, or your dissertation research, right? So, like in my case, for example, I had a PhD student who was studying like human bones, and my specialty is animal bones, right? So that technicality was outside my wheelhouse, but this student needed field work, and I actually provided this student with field work in Turkey. See, I mean, so I help the student with the field work and all the infrastructure, all the networking in the field, and also archaeology of Turkey, etc. And the second advisor helped the student, supported the student from that missing, within that missing domain, which is, I mean, in that sense, it worked well. But I think it's, again, this responsibility falls on the student almost like entirely, because if you mismanage that situation and if you try to kind of like, you know, play both chairs, right, to your benefit, that can actually create a very convoluted scenario and drama, especially if your co-chairs are not absolutely compatible, right? If there are like power dynamics, if there are difficult personalities, that could become rather troubling. So in that sense, the student must remain 100% professional, right? And very transparent, right? So when you have meetings with your co-chairs, you know, you have to make sure that, you know, you inform both of your chairs what's happening. And when you have a chapter, right? So say you've written 3 chapters and one of your advisors have read, edited, revised, and then you just skip the second co-chair and they don't even know what's going on, right? And then all of a sudden you just put on the table, on their desk, a finished product, and they're like, wait a minute, I've never seen any chapters before. What happened? Oh, I work with Dr. X, right? And he thinks that it's great. Or you give feedback, you say, oh, this is, you know, I have some reservations. And then the student says, oh no, Dr. such and such thinks that it's amazing. See, I mean, you have to be very careful as to not create tension between your co-chairs. It's an act of balance, and politically speaking.
So in our department, we do something, perhaps we have these co-chairs, or it's kind of a co-chair situation. And the reason is that often we have a lot of faculty that are affiliated with our unit that do not sit in faculty meetings or preside over the policies and the rules that sort of guide our graduate students through their program. And so under those circumstances, we appoint a School of Life Science faculty member to co-chair in a way, but they're under those circumstances, they are responsible for making sure that the student is following all the requirements of the program, whereas the external person, who is the primary advisor, primary research advisor, is in large part, you know, helping to mentor the research that the student is doing. And so, again, I guess that goes to show that sometimes it can work nicely, but there has to be a division of labor and clear descriptions of what each person's role is. And then I think it can work. So, you know, if you are about to embark upon a situation where you are going to have co-chairs, I would, as a graduate student, even precipitate the conversation. Okay, so how are we going to, how do we work together here? What's the responsibilities of each of the chairs? Can we have that discussion all together to try and make sure that everybody knows what the sort of situation is and the mentoring relationship is? And I think that's wholly appropriate for you to sort of raise that as a graduate student, because ultimately, if it makes the communication between your co-chairs better, then, you know, you're going to end up in a better place yourself.
Actually, I just want to make another note, if you don't mind. I think we all assume this, but I think it might be worthy maybe reminding of everyone this mentor-mentee relationship is based on mutual interest, right? Because, you know, you're a graduate student, we assume that, you know, you're really excited about your research topic, you're really passionate about it. And we also assume that, you know, you'll work with mentors or advisors who are equally interested in your research. And they also recognize mutual interest, right? So it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Because again, it's mentoring up, mentoring down. They're learning from you, but as mentor, you're also learning from your graduate students. So in that sense, I think that's why I'm just going to go back to the beginning, right, and reiterate the same point: choose wisely, because in terms of, in addition to all the administrative tasks, right, this should be one of the central ideas, right? You work with faculty members who share your passion, who share your interest in your research topic, so they're excited, right? So when you just go to them when you set a meeting to discuss your research, they're not like, oh, another meeting. No, they're like, wow, I'm really curious, right? I'm really intrigued by your ideas. I'm really actually just excited for all the progress you're making. So I think that'll just make everything else secondary. If you can catch that, right? I think to me that's the key. If you just can find that passion in that relationship, the rest will be just the rest will organically develop accordingly.
What suggestions do you have for navigating conflicting feedback between advisors and committee members?
Uh-oh. Who wants to go first?
So everybody's quiet on that one.
Yes, this one's always a tricky one, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I think one way that you can do it is to reiterate what you're hearing. Because if you say what you heard, it can help the professors to realize that they give you conflicting information. And that's a little bit difficult to do, but if you say it like, so what I'm hearing today is this, but I'm a bit confused because I thought I heard earlier this, it's right there in front of them. They can't get out of that, and they can then help you navigate that. So if you're confused, that's how I would handle that. And ideally, doing it in your committee meeting that you hold, hopefully you're doing this annually, right? Where you get everybody in the same room and you talk about your research on an annual basis. It's so important to do that because you need everybody in the same room to be able to have that discussion that I've just sort of explain to you, where you can call them out on the conflicting information that they perhaps have given you. Okay, so I know it's extra work to have committee meetings, and I know it's really hard to get all of these very busy people in the room, in one room at the same time, but it really, it's like hundreds of emails saved just by getting everybody in the room at the same time for maybe an hour and a half or something like that. I can't advocate more for that process than that, but that's one way I would handle it.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, be responsible, okay? Understand that this is your career, this is your professional development, right? Because your professor has already gone through the same process, successfully navigated that, got the degree, landed a job, got tenured, etc., right? So they're on your team, just understand, right? They're not your enemy. Even when they're negative, even when they criticize your work, what's the idea behind that? To help you grow, to help you develop, right? So in that sense, be responsible, right? Take responsibility, be professional, don't be defensive. Okay, I think that's key. Don't be defensive, okay? To make sure that you're understanding your professor correctly or capturing the ideas accurately, paraphrase, say, so I see that you read my manuscript and you think that the chapter, this chapter needs rewriting because X, Y, Z, to see like if you've understood it correctly, right? And then if your professor confirms, right, then respect your mentor's suggestions, right? But if you really disagree, if you don't, find like any room for you to agree with what you're suggesting. Just respectfully disagree, and again, without being defensive, without being reactionary, right? Just kind of articulate why you still believe that this is what you want to go, what you want to do, and this is how you want to proceed, right? But articulate it, okay? And if you feel like you're not in a very strong position to articulate, take your time. I mean, you don't have to just, because again, it's not like a match, right? You don't have to just respond on the spot or debate, because it's not, again, this is not a competition. You're not trying to win, right? But if you seriously think that, you have solid ground and you want to maintain what you already have, just take some time, like think about it, reflect on it. And if you still feel the same way, like, again, because you want to get rid of all the emotions, right? All the stress, with cool head, look at the same conversation again. Not in an emotionally reactive way, but in a reasonably responsive way. If you still feel like, I still believe that, I'm just going to maybe dismiss this suggestion, I'm not going to adopt it, then I think you should go back and you should actually establish your point, articulate assertively, and then then see what happens. Okay. But again, just remember, your advisor is on your side, in your corner, trying to help you, coach you. Don't just get into power battles, because sometimes, especially when you have incompatibility between the mentor and mentee, it may turn into like, I'm not going to do what you're asking me to do, because I have issues with your authority, right? I'm just going to reject your authority. I'm not going to subordinate. So, and that's not professional domain now, that's personal, right? So in that sense, I think it's always a good idea to just focus on the message, sometimes avoid the tone. And actually, that was my success surviving the graduate school, because I worked with a faculty mentor whose style was rather abrupt, and students going into my primary advisor's office, sometimes I would see people leaving his office crying, right? So in that sense, every meeting was stressful, and I taught myself to just don't look at the body language, don't look at the facial right expressions or gestures, don't look at the tone or delivery, just focus on the message, right? Just focus on the message. Okay, what he's saying is that my introduction can benefit from this, right? Addition of this, or having another element. I hope this is helpful.
In our area, it's a little different, because in terms of a committee and a advisor, that would be at the thesis proposal and dissertation level. So we'd have a conversation if there's conflicting information, and we kind of figure out how best to deal with that. Another way that this might come out is if you have a professor in one class telling a student one thing, and like a directive, right? And then maybe there's a directive in the clinic, and somebody else is telling them something else. Anytime a student is getting conflicting information, again, clarifying, like it's already been said, I just wanted to make sure I understand this is the information that you've been given, or that you've been asked, directive you want me to do, or this is the feedback that you've given me. I'm confused. I was told before to do it this way. I'm really not sure how to proceed. So kind of from a one down, not getting defensive. I think that's kind of the best way to approach that.
But I think this shows that there are so many different ways, these things just pan out, right? In different fields, in different disciplines, in different departments, because I think department culture, and sometimes even individual faculty, because some faculty members are very, very tight and hands-on, while others are like, just do it, right? Just do it and come back when you're done, right? And I'm just going to sign off. So in that sense, yeah, I think the big picture is really important. The context is really important. In what context you're actually operating, understanding all these conventions.
So as we near the end of our time today, do you all have some last suggestions to share with us how first students can best utilize their advisors and committee members?
Well, my idea would be to ask the students if in the room if they have any questions about particular things, because it's hard to guess what important information our students are seeking. So I think while we perhaps wait for those to trickle in the chat, be open. Remember, you're on a journey of personal growth. It's not always going to be easy. Concentrate on the facts that you know, like that Dr. TC was saying, you know, focus on what's being delivered to you as opposed to how or all the body language or any of that. That will help you grow the most. And also remember, the committee is structure that means that you're not at the sole, you know, you don't have one person. Your graduate education isn't riding on the shoulders of one person. It's a whole committee. And at times you may need to use the committee as a whole, or maybe different individuals on that committee as your ally or as your, you know, sounding board. And I would encourage you to do that too.
Yeah, I would add, again, choose wisely, right? It's really important. It's your job to make this commitment, right? Choose wisely, be serious about your work, be passionate, be responsible, be professional, set clear expectations and realistic expectations, under promise, overachieve, right? And also respect boundaries, respect your mentor's time, right? And don't be defensive, be coachable. I think it's really, really important. Be coachable, meaning just understand that you're a team, your committee members, they're all on your team, and diversify your committee members, right? Get members with different strengths. So I would choose, like, for example, one senior member versus one junior, and maybe outside the department, etc. And communicate. Again, I mean, communicate, be clear, and give feedback so that you can receive feedback.
I know we just have a few minutes left. There's a question about when should we follow up about with the chair for feedback on work. I think that goes back to communication. I think you should work out a schedule with your chair if you're writing to say, okay, we're going to meet once a week, once every 2 weeks. This is how the flow is going to go. So you know that this is when you can anticipate a week or 2 weeks response from your chair. For my students, if I have a busy time coming up, I let them know, hey, here's the deal. I've got a bunch of stuff coming up. I may be slow to respond. So I try to communicate that back to them. If you send me something and I don't respond, it's, you know, I'm not blowing you off, but I just can't respond right then. So I think that expectation needs to, like, you should ask your chair, how often should I, you know, expect response back on if we're working on a draft? Then there's a question about if the mentoring relationship is specifically personally attacking, not just critiquing the work. Do you know what resources you and LV might offer to mitigate that stress conflict? Again, empower those on the lower. Yes. So again, chain of command. So you would start with the next person. So you would go to your graduate coordinator and then, you know, talk with them. If that's the person, then perhaps if the next step up is the department chair, then maybe that's the next step that you would go. You know, most universities have a place that you can go to report if there is negligence or malpractice, that you can make reports of those. But I usually, and even they're going to say, who did you talk to already? Who did you start with? You know, you always, and again, in the place of business, it's going to be the same way. Who did you start with? You always start with your direct person up and then the person up from them. You don't call the president of the university. You don't call the dean of the college, right? Like those are the things you don't do. That does not serve in your favor. So that's how you would navigate that. And if you find that you're going up the chain and no one's responding to you, then I would say at that point, if you've done all of those things, then I would say perhaps then you might reach out to the grad college and say, I need advice on how to navigate this chain of command. I don't know who to turn to. Can you help me with that process?
I think graduate college has a committee, right? If I'm not mistaken, Marlena, correct me, a severance committee to
Yes.
handle such issues. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I-
again, not the first place to go.
Yeah,
And I just want to echo what Sarah was saying there. In fact, it will look really bad if you go outside of the chain of command.
Mhm.
It will look like you're, a drama queen making trying to, I don't know, do things that are inappropriate. You want to be taken seriously. The right way to do it is by using the chain of command. You will get listened to much more seriously if you follow the protocol in that.
I would even argue that even before escalating it to the graduate coordinator, it might be wise to, of course, I assume that, you already have conversation with your committee chair and it hasn't, generated any results. So I would also talk to other committee members so that, they're not blindsided because they're also on your committee, they're serving you. So I think just bypassing them to go to grad coordinator directly is not a great idea. I would first actually approach them because the issue may be one that could be resolved easily, right, among the members of the committee. And if it doesn't just generate positive results, then you can actually escalate it to the graduate coordinators.
I think we are just about out of time, so I just wanted to thank you all so much for sharing your time and expertise with us today. We'll be posting this workshop to the Graduate College YouTube channel, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.
Best of luck with your studies, everyone.
Thanks. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for inviting us, Marlena. I appreciate that.
Yes.